Good afternoon and welcome to this edition of Living Well with Adena. I'm Dr. John Gabus, Medical Director of Community Partnerships for Adena Health System. We have a pre-recorded session today, so unfortunately we won't be able to answer any live questions, but please feel free to comment and we'll get back to you if we can. Today we're going to be talking about something that is incredibly important for each and every one of us, and it is literacy. And literacy is so much more than just being able to read. It's comprehension. It's interacting with the world in the written form. So joining us today is Adena, who's the Director of Curriculum Instruction for the Chillicothe City School District. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
And before we jump into our topic, I want to be sure to ask you to please, if you're not vaccinated completely, please complete your series. And if you have not started your series, please get vaccinated. Our coronavirus count has gone way up, and please do your part. That's why we're back in masks and social distancing, and please vaccinate. Thank you. Well, Adena, it was so nice to meet you in person. We've had some other conversations previously. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I am a Chillicothe native. My husband and I were actually born at Adena, and I'm a 1993 graduate of Chillicothe City Schools. So I'm really excited that my career has brought me back into the city school system. We're residents of Chillicothe, and I'm the proud parent of a first grader at Chillicothe Primary. I've just started this new position as Director of Curriculum and Instruction, and I'm very excited about the opportunity.
Can you let us know, what does a Director of Curriculum and Instruction do?
Well, my job is to oversee the things that are taught in the schools. I help with selection of materials and programs. I listen to the teachers and what they need, and I try to find them, whether it's professional development or books, and support them in meeting the needs of each of our students.
Well, that's great. And I can't imagine not having somebody whose focus is developing that curriculum and keeping it current and keeping it refreshed, I would think, would be an important thing.
It absolutely is, and we're very lucky that the city schools has made an investment in dedicating a position just to that portion of educating.
Oh, terrific.
Children.
And I can tell by your personality that you're giving it 125%. So thank you for helping our children in our community. So let's start to dig into literacy. As I've been in my role as Medical Director of Community Partnerships, I've started to study more about literacy. And what I've learned is that from pre-K, or actually from birth to grade 3, children are learning to read. After grade 3, they're reading to learn. And that's why literacy, I think, is so very, very important, is to get that foundational structure in place. How do you assess for literacy competency in the city schools?
Well, one of the things that we do is we believe that while reading is made up of lots of small skills, the best way to assess a child is to listen to them read. And so currently all of our teachers are being trained in different assessment tools that allow them to listen to a student read, take notes on the things they do well and the skills that they're struggling with, and then tailor that child's educational experience over the next few weeks to those needs that were identified while the teacher was listening to them read.
That's a very practical approach. I imagine it would be really hard to keep track of all of that if you have 20 or 25 students in your class. What types of tools or helps or aids do the teachers have to help that?
Well, we have made quite an investment in literacy because we do believe that it is the single most important skill that students need. And so we have recently at the elementary level hired 5 reading intervention teachers. They do pull out with students if we've identified that they have a need in phonological awareness or comprehension. They will take them out of the classroom and work intensely on those skills. We also have 3 what we call reading coaches. Last year, they finished up a very intensive training with Ohio State University. And their job is to go into the classrooms, and the teachers can share with them some of the things their students may be struggling with, and they are there to support the teachers in doing exactly what you just mentioned, keeping track of all of the records, meeting the children at different times during the day in different groups, and really giving each classroom teacher the support to make it a successful experience for all of their children.
Well, that sounds like that is a huge investment, and so glad that our city has that mindset that literacy is the key to their success as a pupil. If you had to list maybe the top 3 success factors for a child to be reading by the end of grade 3 at grade level, what would those top 3 be?
I think the first one would definitely be exposure to reading, and that starts very young. Students with broader vocabularies tend to score better in all types of assessments. It doesn't matter if it's a science or a social studies or a literacy assessment. Children need background knowledge. They need big words. The more words that a child has heard by the time they enter kindergarten, the better reader they will be. So I think definitely exposure is one of them. Probably the second one is practice. The opportunity to read the same book over and over again. And sometimes as a parent or a teacher, it makes us sigh. But for a child to feel that confidence, even if they don't know all of the words, to know that they know what the print on the page means. So definitely exposure and practice. And then also just the basic skills, knowing their letters, understanding that letters have more than one sound associated with them, and that there are some words in the English language that just don't make sense. And so those would say be the top 3 things.
That's good. My grandson, when we read together, he has a hard time with some, and it makes me think of the French language, where a lot of the consonants are silent. So the G and the H and the C and the H could mean so many different things. So thank you for that top 3 list. What can parents do early in life to help their child develop that vocabulary, to be exposed to a lot of different words? I know that there's a lot of screen time that occurs even at 1 or 2 years old. How do we help parents get that foundation started so early?
Well, I think by making sure that they understand that raising a child in a literacy-rich environment doesn't just mean reading books. It's also the conversations that happen within the home. And while there are some great apps that are out there for letter recognition and some really good early TV shows, nothing compares to listening to your parents speak. And so just simple things. If you're doing the dishes, bring your child out and talk them through each step. Explain why you're doing this. Why do we wash them before we dry them? And encouraging kids to engage in a conversation with them. And also, when a child asks a question and they're full of them, model how you find that answer. That is a good use of technology. My son the other day asked me what the largest worm in the world was. Well, I was able to pull out my phone and read to him some of the text off of the phone. And that was able to model for him that words have meaning, and words can help you to understand the world around you.
I know as an adult, our learning process is mostly to solve problems. And I'm assuming that in childhood, if they're curious like that, and you look up what the largest worm is, they will remember that because they were curious about it and they had a question answered or a problem solved. So parents can read to their children. They can have conversations more than just, hey, go let the dog in, or hey, could you let me know what you have for homework tonight, or something more in depth. And really, it provides a context of where this word comes up. So I think all of that's important. So we have an infant or a toddler, and we've talked about that. What does pre-kindergarten and that curriculum do to help a child learn to read?
Well, it lays the foundation for being ready to read, and it gets children excited about reading. You know, our goal is to read at least 10 books a week in our preschool, in our kindergarten, and first and second grade. And we do that because we want children to see reading as this exciting opportunity to not only learn things, but to grow your imagination, to think about things you have never thought about before, and to understand that there's a world that's imaginary and there's a world that's real. And there's no better way of reaching a child than through some exciting, well-written literature.
Now that excitement leads to being a lifelong reader. And I know that I was, as a child, it was very important to me to read, and it did open a whole set of horizons for me and help me to get where I'm at today and where you're at today. So that's pre-kindergarten and getting the mechanism ready. In kindergarten through first and second grade, what are some of the key components that have to fit? I remember learning phonics when I was a child. And is phonics still a critical component?
Phonics is a very critical component, and as is phonemic awareness, that being able to not just produce the sound, but be able to hear the sound and distinguish how many parts does this word have. And that's the skill that we use a lot when we are writing, because we can hear the word and then we have to produce each of those sounds. And so that is a very big component of all of the learning to read curriculums. And as I mentioned, the background knowledge, study after study has shown that children read better when they're reading about something they understand. And so we have, since Chillicothe Primary is a STEM school, we have a lot of science enriched curriculum. And so the students are reading a lot about those topics that they're familiar with. They're writing a lot about the topics they're familiar with. So phonemic awareness, once again, sight words, words that you just know because you know them. And that just takes a lot of practice. At home, you can show them items in print. You can point it out if the TV is on. Oh, look at that. There's a word. Do you know that word? Sending your child on a scavenger hunt for a word. If you're getting in the car, write down a couple of those words. It's sort of like the game where you look for letters on a license plate or states on a license plate. Give them a stack of words and see who can find them in the community as you're riding around is always a good approach for that.
Yeah, and that's fun.
Yes.
So
Yes.
reading is not a drudgery. Reading is a very fun activity that kids can be learning all day long, and it can be very fun. So let's look at some of the critical implications, if you will, of not being able to read at grade level by the end of grade 3. If a child is behind, how does that play out through the rest of the primary grades in middle school and high school and even as an adult? How does that catch up with the child?
Well, a child who can't read by third grade is more likely to struggle in every subject area. Reading is the foundation for social studies. Even in the arts, they will struggle with some of their coursework if they can't read to learn. And so it's just imperative that we have that in place by the time they hit third grade. And when you look at post-graduation and we talk about how this impacts the community, the statistics vary, but they're very high. If you can't read by the time you graduate, you're more likely to end up in prison or on welfare. And we don't want that for any of our students. Our schools are filled with children that can bring so much to this community. And so we have to do everything that we can possibly do to ensure that they are leaving us able to read and able to interact with the world.
I can imagine if I were a child and say I were in high school and I was having difficulty reading, I think I would be so frustrated and so dejected that I probably wouldn't finish high school because I'm struggling so much. Does that happen if you're not able to read very well?
Unfortunately, that is something that's very common in a lot of students who do drop out and not finish their high school career because it is hard. And there is a stigma sometimes that sometimes the students assign to themselves that I can't read, or the reading material is too childish for me as an 8th grader. And one of the things that Chillicothe City Schools is committing to is we want 75% of a student's week to be on their level and within their interest. And so the training that I had mentioned that our reading coaches had taken at Ohio State is really tuned into meeting every child where they are. And we really work to find literature that is more appropriate for older students, because we don't want anyone to feel ashamed because they're acquiring their skills at a slower pace. We want them to feel supported, and we want them to know that we are their biggest cheerleader.
Mm-hmm. As a family physician who has taken care of hundreds and hundreds of children as they went from infancy to toddler to preschool to primary school and on, I know that it's so important to have that level of confidence and to be able to achieve and to develop that excitement of reading. And like we talked about, reading is a fundamental of learning. Whenever you're trying to meet children where they're at, how do you get a whole class to progress? So, reading, writing, and arithmetic, you have to get certain skills. I imagine it's pretty hard to move kids along at their pace, which is actually the best way to do it.
Yes, and that is, we've committed to a new reading approach. It's actually an old reading approach, but our students receive small group reading anywhere from 3 times to 5 times a week, depending on their needs. And so we really are going back to those assessments and determining what it is they need. And then we group students with other students who need the same skill. Not necessarily that they are all reading at the same level, but there are definite reading behaviors that they need some additional practice with. We also, one of the things that we've changed a little bit is we're working on doing away with spelling lists where everyone has the same spelling list. To more, the student shows us where they are, what skills they've mastered, and then we provide them with practice on words they don't know yet. And it is hard. It is difficult to manage, but we have phenomenal teachers who are committed to doing this right, and they are willing to put in the work, and they are willing to look at it as a team. If there's a student who doesn't have a group they fit in, they go next door. It's one of the bonuses of having consolidated our elementaries is lots of first grades, lots of kindergartens, and the students can flow freely back and forth based on their needs.
Okay, great. I know that whenever I read with my grandson, one of the things that I told him is, I can't wait to read with you because I love to read. And he wasn't so excited as I was. And now he says, why do we have to read so much? How do you help parents to encourage that excitement? How do you help them overcome some of that resistance?
Well, showing students purpose for it. So if you really reflect and think about why do we read? Well, sometimes we read to cook. So reading a recipe is an important thing, and involving your child in that. As adults, print has become a little bit different for us. We do a lot of auditory learning. We're listening to podcasts. We have audiobooks. We have news on in the background. And really taking time to sit down and say to your child, I need to learn a little bit about this. I'm going to pull out this. Or if you're putting together a toy for them and saying, oh, I have to read the directions. Would you help me to read the directions? And even as the students get older, a lot of people think they need to stop reading with their child once they hit kindergarten or first grade. But I encourage parents, even if your child's reading chapter books, take time. You read one chapter, they read one chapter. They're picking up on fluency. They're picking up on on voices, how to use different voices for different characters. And so that's a very important role for parents, modeling. How do I know how to read directions? I need to have those reading skills. And really reflecting on where you read in your life and demonstrating that for your child.
That's terrific. Are there structured ways that parents can partner with the reading curriculum? And, you know, do we give the parents a set of tools like how to sound out a word, or how as a parent they can tie into the same cues that children receive in the classroom?
Yes, if you pay attention to what comes home in the backpacks, frequently one of the things that our coaches are doing is sending home tips for how to read with a child, tips on things that you can do while you're reading. We all know sound it out. That is typically the way that we were taught as children, and there's so many more strategies for supporting your child. And so keep in touch with your classroom teacher, attend conferences. They will be giving you lots of ideas on what you should be doing with your child to meet their needs. And really, if you have questions, reach out to your classroom teacher. They're always willing to help you because it is a team effort.
Sure, because it can't just be the 6.5 or 7 hours in the school day. What about weekends? What about summers?
Absolutely.
So whenever kids are done with books that you purchase, and for some parents, that's going to be a barrier in terms of being able to afford to buy books. Well, we have a library system that can offer so much. They have children's librarians in the Chillicothe and Ross County Public Library System. What are other ways that people can share their love of reading?
Well, down at the library that is located, the branch library that's located in Mount Logan, they have a little lending library outside where people can drop off books that have been used, and they can trade them in for someone else's book. It just takes a short peruse through Amazon to see that children's books per word are very expensive. And so anything we can do as a community to kind of share those books around, to call your classroom teacher, ask if it's something that they would need, or they may know of a student who would need some books in their classroom. We're really hoping that after the pandemic comes down, to have more people coming in to read with the children while they're in school. And get your library card. It is such a wonderful resource, and we have such a great system here in Ross County. And they have access to books, any book that you could ever want, and it's free. And so spend some time with your child at the library, make a big deal out of getting their library card, and utilize it.
That's a great suggestion. So as a community member who really cares about the future of our community, with children being well educated, how can I, as a community member, help you as an educator and the children who are learning to read? I heard you mention one of those, and that's coming into the schools to actually do reading aloud or listening to other children read. What else can we as a community do?
Well, if you reach out to your classroom teacher, we love for our students to see people in the community. We've had some community members that have Zoomed in to read aloud to a class, which is always very exciting for the kids.
It's a special event.
Yes, it is a special event. And reaching out to the building administrators and seeing if they have some programs in place. I know you and I have been talking about making some recordings that we could send out via some of the technology-based programs we have in the district, so that kids can hear that language from people who aren't their parents, from the community members. So really just being in close contact with the schools. Each school in Ross County has a different need and a different avenue that you can support literacy instruction in their buildings. And so having that free, open communication is a great place to start.
One of the questions that I've been meaning to ask you is, who's your favorite author and what is your favorite book?
Well, I like someone, his name's David Wisner, and he actually wrote a book called Tuesday, and there are hardly any words in it. The pictures tell all the story. And I was a kindergarten teacher in Chillicothe City Schools, and I loved that book. We would pull it out because it gave us the opportunity to make up the story as we went. And so that is definitely one of my very favorite books. And Room on the Broom, and I'm losing the author's name right now, but it's a Halloween book. And that was the first book that my son and I were able to read together. He could fill in the rhyming words, and so it has a special place in my heart as well.
Oh, nice. Our favorites have been the Mercer Mayer series.
Yes.
You know, when you have the gimmies, or you know, teaching a moral or a principle. We always enjoyed those, and looking for the little spider and the grasshopper in each of the pictures with our children. So that's Mercer Mayer is important to our kids, and will be to their children, because when they're at our house, we'll be reading them the same books that we read to our children.
Yes.
So let's turn back again, if you don't mind, to the reading at grade 3 level. No Child Left Behind was an initiative, a governmental initiative, that I think brought to light how important that was to be able to be reading at grade 3. Has that been successful?
It has. It has definitely shown a bright spotlight on the importance of getting students reading, and getting students reading quickly. The challenge has always lied in how do we assess students in a way that we can compare students across the United States, but that also actually measures whether or not they can read. You know, as I mentioned earlier, sometimes assessments are based on just isolated skills, but at the end of the day, it is whether or not they can read. And the other big challenge that came out of that was, how do we measure that on a huge scale, and take the human error out of it, where the teacher is just listening. So there have been both great achievements that have come out of that, but we're still struggling with some of the challenges on how to universally screen children.
And one of the things that we've hinted at maybe a couple of times is the impact of the pandemic on children being able to read at grade level. What have you seen in your experience over the past year with children? Are they falling behind at a faster rate? Are they keeping up? Or have there been some silver linings in this pandemic where some children are accelerating?
You know, it has been something that we're just now digging through, and there have been some very challenging things. We were really lucky in our school district that we decided to go ahead with in-person schooling last year and provide the option for online learning. So everyone that needed a place had a place to learn. But there was a sharp learning curve with how do you deliver literacy instruction across a computer. And so we tried the best to layer that. And as I mentioned earlier, a lot of literacy is language development. And the social distancing and the masking, while very needed, has been challenging for conversational learning with students. When you're looking at letter sounds and hearing sounds, students have struggled to hear their teachers through the mask. We don't know what type of effect that really has had, but we did very early on this year, we knew it was going to be a little bit different. So at the primary, we assessed every student in the building within the first 7 days of school, so we could get an idea of where they were. And some students stayed home and had wonderful experiences. Some students had minimal experiences. Some students were in school, but quarantined for a large part of the year, on and off. And so every kid's coming to us with some unique holes. And so we're having to do things we've never done before to try to address those. And but in the process, we've discovered that we can use technology to do some amazing things. You know, like I mentioned, having people come into the classroom to read without ever walking through the door, that has been one thing that we have really learned. And it also has forced us to really individualize our instruction. And we hope that that is something we can take and hold on to and learn that's a positive.
Sure. It's a very intensive way to approach it, but it may pay off with grade level reading for years to come.
We are very hopeful, very hopeful.
So what exciting new things are coming up with the Chillicothe City School District that will help impact in a positive way those in pre-K or early primary school? I know there are some big plans.
Yes, we are very, very excited. We know that students entering kindergarten are entering it with a vast gap in their experiences. And so the city schools has committed to building a new preschool. We're hoping to be in it by 2023. We're working on the construction side of that, but we believe that we can give between 200 and 250 students from Chillicothe a strong pre-kindergarten experience that is rich with literacy and that helps them enter into an inquiry-based system like we have at Chillicothe Primary, where we support them in exploring the world around them and experimenting and building alongside reading great literature and just learning how to identify their name and getting to understand what reading is all about. And so we really think that that will be a big investment in our community, and we think we will see the payoff very quickly.
And I think we will all benefit from those children who go through that readiness assessment and the readiness training in pre-K. It will help them be successful not only during their education time, but as an adult.
Absolutely.
Well, Dana, it has been such a pleasure, and I have picked up on your energy, and I'm excited about reading and about literacy, and literacy not just being reading, but the whole context of learning language. So we look forward to more great things from the Chillicothe City School District in reading and literacy, and please, we want to help in any way that we can.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and we look forward to years of great partnerships.
That's great. Well, thank you very much for attending this session of Living Well with Adena with Dana Letts, who's the Director of Curriculum and Instruction at Chillicothe City School District. We thank you for watching this pre-recorded session. If you left any comments, we'll try to get back to you as quickly as we can. Thank you very much. Stay safe, wash your hands, wear your mask, and get vaccinated. Have a great day.